Well, first of all, I am, every day I walk into our building, I am still as honored as when I was selected to be the president. I know that sounds corny. However, it's truly what I believe. And I think that I came into the particular organization of the foundation at a very good time. And we were just on the cusp, the whole field of, boy, this could really go places. So, and to go places, we really needed to band together with what I would say very influential organizations. The Council of Michigan Foundations, the Council of Michigan Foundations was the first stop for me, outside of figuring out who's to who and what's going on in the office and everything. And the Community Foundation has been a member of the Council of Michigan Foundation since its inception. And at that time, prior to the Community Foundation services specifically being organized, there was a strong core of Community Foundation leaders that would meet periodically with the wonderful guidance of Dottie Johnson. And so that was a good place of sharing knowledge and sharing concerns, but also building the capital, if you will, for being able to do things together. When, along the way, the Johnson Center being created, wow, that was started actually sitting on the board of a organization that's no longer in existence called Direction Center. And by design, there were 2 representatives from the Community Foundation, 2 representatives from the United Way here in the area, Grand Valley State University, and I'm forgetting that's it, I think, United Way, but anyway. And Joel and Russ were the instigators, if you will, around the necessity of having a more focused look at philanthropy as a whole in the state, but through a university. Thus gave birth to what we now know as the Dorothy A. Johnson Center on Philanthropy. The Michigan Community Service Commission, my involvement with that in the beginning had a lot to do with CMF, and in regard to a youth program as well. And that's when I first met Kyle Caldwell, and working in that regard. I've never been on the board nor really deeply involved with the Michigan Community Service Commission, but I certainly do admire their work and very happy that they are in existence and that they continue to be a strong voice in securing the funding so that we can leverage it throughout all the communities with regard to volunteer services and other programs that have emerged over the course of the last 20 plus years. And again, the Michigan Nonprofit Association, I can remember when that was created, again by Russ and others, and the purposes behind that. And Dottie Johnson and Russ and others really played a role in its bringing the voice of the Michigan nonprofits together. And it started with the Grant Maker, Grant Seeker Conference. And I believe the year was like 1988 when that was birthed. And then emerged out of that were the leaders of saying, well, we need to really more structure this and codify this, and it's certainly under Kyle's leadership today a very strong voice in our state. It was not magical, but close to it. I would say because many of us, certainly Dottie, to me, was is and continues to be, I would say, the real primary philanthropic force, not only in Michigan, but worldwide. And I don't say that in a contrived way. I say that in a deep meaning kind of way. I think her leadership really inspired many because She is an aspirational thinker, and a force to be reckoned with. And that's a good thing. And so she would plant seeds, sometimes broad hints, sometimes really bluntly saying, you ought to be doing this. And you know what? She was right every time. And so around the conceptual table, if you will, people from Kellogg, people from other types of foundations, and the real appreciation that in my world of community foundations, it wasn't just about community foundations. It was understanding the whole of what I would say organized philanthropy with all types of foundations, and how it was so critical for, regardless of where you make your decisions, with either a family foundation, a corporate foundation, a corporate giving program, a community foundation, whatever, that we honor and respect those decisions because they come from maybe different places. And that's when we started having conversations many years ago, came ideas about, well, you know, we could do a lot better if we banded together. And so when you think of the four primary statewide organizations that we're discussing, the growth of community foundations, the growth of corporate philanthropy, it was around, I would say, issues and projects that coalesced us. And I feel like we've all been traveling down the same path for a long time. So I think longevity, it plays a key role, maybe not 25 years ago because we were all still kind of figuring it out, but now it really does. And a deep respect that while we can still argue the great debate, we certainly walk out of our rooms, if you will, out of the meeting rooms, arm in arm saying, but we've got to do this for a good reason. So I think it's because we understood that we had greater power together, and power in a positive way, that gave rise to, I think, the strength of Michigan philanthropy. When I go out of state, I will tell you that people look to Michigan as really not only one of the leaders in philanthropy in this country, but the leader in philanthropy. And it's not just because we have a lot of the larger independent foundations here. It's because we have such a deep history of the growth of community foundations. And again, you know, when I think of my colleagues in Western Michigan, we've never had problems like that has emerged in other areas of the country in terms of, you know, saying, well, this is my territory, no, that's your territory. And it's not always, I mean, it's collegial. That doesn't mean we don't have differences of opinion. And I think that helps make sure that the conversation is much more enriched. You know, those four people, Randy and Joel, Dottie and Russ, I don't know how you explain it. They are magical. Because, and I love watching them when the rare moments these days when they are together to talk. Well, first of all, they don't talk over each other. You can tell they really want to hear what the other one has to say. And I love it when they well, you know, I'm going to take a page of that and I'm going to add another page to it. It's graciousness without being diluted. It's humor. How can you think of Joel without thinking with that wonderful sense of humor? And you better darn well be well-read and intelligent sometimes to get the drift. And so I would say, you know, I certainly, when I started out at the Community Foundation, I had a lot of rough edges. I was pretty young. And, you know, that hasn't stopped my spark or my ability to speak out. What I learned from the four of them is better listening and not give in to spontaneous blurting, but more of a careful thought and review and truly the word respect comes out of, and to watch those four. And graciousness, Russ always wrote the most beautiful, and probably still does, thank you notes over things that I'm thinking, wow, how did you know that? How did you see that? So the lessons learned from all four. When Rob and the leadership of the board asked me to chair, I think there was some trepidation. And what that was interpreted ultimately was I became emerged out of that was there's no need to fear. I'm all about philanthropy, and I'm all about really trying to shoulder in and make sure that CMF continues to be the spectacular regional association that it is. Not just regional association, leader in the country and globally. So my reason for wanting to take on that wonderful role at opportunity, I didn't think it was a challenge, I thought it was an opportunity, and it kind of came right on the cusp, or as it was ending my term there, was when the world imploded with regard to the recession. So stormy waters were certainly ahead. But the reason why it's worked, Dottie Johnson was certainly one reason why it worked. Kathy Agard was a reason why it worked. Rob Collier is a reason why it works, and certainly Donnell Mercereau. So there are the real strength of that. Dottie never gives up. And so when she sees great opportunity, even with a person with rough edges, it's like, there's something there, and we're going to make sure that something comes out when we're sitting around the table trying to figure out knotty issues that are coming up through the ranks. The Council of Michigan Foundations, having now tremendous experience at the national level through serving on the board of the Council on Foundations currently, I've experienced other regional associations, and they're all over the map. They're all good. There is no bad there. But they all look to the Council of Michigan Foundations as the model, and we need to take that seriously, not from an arrogant way, but from a real modeling kind of a way. And the role of the Council of Michigan Foundations has become very critical in the area of public policy, as well as not only in Michigan, but certainly at the national level as well. So never give up. Show up, be smart, and don't be afraid to dive into issues, and that's why CMF has really worked. The group of foundations known as community foundations will be celebrating as a field its 100th anniversary in a year. The Cleveland Foundation was the first community foundation in this country, founded by Frederick Goff, a lawyer and a banker. What a visionary 100 years ago to create these unassigned trusts to benefit the community. What a gift. Along the way, many changes occurred. We became known as community foundations generally. And for many years, the Grand Rapids Community Foundation was known as the Grand Rapids Foundation. And we realized that in the year 1991, and I was again also serving in a capacity at the national level on the forerunner to the now known Community Foundations leadership team. I chaired a committee called the Community Foundations, the Committee on Community Foundations. Community foundations were up in arms because Fidelity Investments had filed for an IRS letter ruling in Brooklyn, New York, to create a charitable gift fund. The charitable gift fund was, and still is, and a huge, if either one or number two nationally in terms of assets, became a competitor, if you will, of a product known as a donor advised fund at a community foundation. At that time, the field was what I would say community foundations were the sleeping giants in their communities. Fundraising was a kind of a concept that they didn't want to adopt. The reality was that community foundations do need to raise resources and give the community opportunity to do that, as well as to work on community leadership. Well, at that time, it shocked the field so much, particularly the larger community foundations. And for about 7-8 years, it was a cranky, disruptive time, and lots of, well, why didn't somebody see this coming down the street? Why? Well, in the meantime, the wisdom of some of the community foundation leaders here in Michigan, and in particular, Miriam Nolan from the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan, she promptly raised her head in the late 1990s and said, you know, this isn't going to be resolved at the national level. We need to, as a state, because we knew we really respected and trusted one another, we really need to understand how we can bring ourselves together. And we went through, well, maybe there's an ad agency that can do this. Oh, we had years of that. Nobody quite got us. And then I, through a relationship that we have with a firm in Grand Rapids, a strategic marketing firm, the Williams Group, it's now known as, one of its principals is a gentleman by the name of Bob Tobin. And because we had been working with him for a long time, he's the voice of reason, a selfless individual, and great staff, smart. I introduced him to the group of community foundation leaders, and he went through a real good exercise of branding 101 before it became kind of known in the last 10, 12 years as, oh, branding. The branding was, okay, who are we? He convinced us through a really smart exercise for the 8 community foundations at that time who did not have the word community in their names to really seriously consider doing that. Because if we were going to do a statewide effort that said, look for your community foundation in your community, and somebody in the Kent County area here in Grand Rapids was to say, well, I don't think we have a community foundation. We have something called the Grand Rapids Foundation, but we don't know what that. So that's what started that. And it was really through Bob's vision, and he got us, he understood us, and created an identity that many community foundations, some did not, adopted, and using the line, and so the appearance of, and then created websites for community foundations, for people to find community foundations, created the phrase, for good, period, forever, period, and it was forever as 2 words. Well, then the grammarians just went nuts. But anyway, that was the beginning of that, and it spread to some degree nationally. There was some resistance to it because at that time people were still responding to the charitable gift funds, and they wanted to be 24/7 fund statements online. They wanted to do pass-through and just focus on this one thing. And I'm thinking, we can be all those things. And we are here for good forever. So anyway, that kind of was the basis for that. And Kellogg was very generous with us. The Mott Foundation, I have to tell you that through the wisdom of Alon Garanzik in the year, I think 2005 or in that era, he commissioned a study and written by Catherine Fulton and Lucy Bernholtz, and really about what's going to be the next surprise for community foundations. And it's on the brink of new promise that has really been a great resource for everyone to realize you just can't sleep. You gotta be awake. The standards became kind of an outgrowth in a way of that branding project. At the national level, when I chaired the Committee on Community Foundations, with all the brouhaha about the charitable gift funds, that emerged out of the committee was, can we just identify what makes us, what do we all value? What are some of the commonalities that we have? Let's not get into anything else, and let's put the swords down, and let's just talk about that. So one night in a meeting room in a hotel in Denver, Colorado, we hammered out 3 hours worth of what do we value, and realized the fighting's got to stop. That birthed national standards, and a woman by the name of Deborah Whitehurst from the Arizona Community Foundation really was she was the one that executed this. And so the first draft, along with some very bright minds from around the country, created the national standards. Prior to that, Donnell Mercereau really also wanted to create a set of standards for the state of Michigan, and did so, that came into being so that we could start really thinking about molding into national standards. And we are the first field of organized philanthropy to identify standards, and because we're fiercely independent and did not want to be regulated by anybody else other than ourselves. So we now have a supporting organization connected to the Council on Foundations that reviews standards for all community foundations who wish to go through that in this country, and there are benefits to being in compliance. You know, I can say it from a personal experience. Again, you know, for 75 years we were known as the Grand Rapids Foundation. And it took some convincing of staff and board of saying, you know, we really are a community foundation, and to not embody that, we will still be known in the community as the Grand Rapids Foundation, no matter what name we choose. To do that, we went through a series of focus groups that Bob Tobin took people through that really helped identify who we really are and what people valued for our role 15 years ago. And armed with that good information, feedback from donors, community leaders, prospects, nonprofit organizations, the wisdom of people at Grand Valley, Aquinas, from our institutes of higher learning. It took about a year, but the board was convinced, as was the staff, that we needed to go forth. And I have to say, I took a deep breath, but we did it because it was now I can say in our 90th anniversary, it has been a real gift to us, and it was really necessary, I feel, for the betterment of the field, and I'm all about that too. You know, I really believe that, as the Grand Rapids Community Foundation, we are not just the city of Grand Rapids. We cover all of Kent County, a tiny corner of southeast Ottawa County, and also have a geographic component fund in Ionia. So, if we're about community, I'm a big believer in people want to identify where they want to identify. County lines don't do it. And I'm a big extender of the olive branch. The best way to have a small town or suburban area or whatever to want to create a community foundation or really emerge is to say to them, you can't do that. We're the community foundation. And then you get a group of real dynamic people who say, oh yeah, watch us. So if you want to grow community foundations, that's a good way to do it. Just be obstinate as the larger foundation in the area. We found Kathy, I'm not supposed to be. We found that with the opportunity that the tax credit provided for us to bring in donors and offering them the ability to take a tax credit, that was going to open up doors to other communities as well. It also came at the same time that the youth initiative effort was starting with the magnificent funding of Kellogg, and that we were given kind of this opportunity. So areas wanted to say, well, gosh, we can get this money from Kellogg if we raise $2 of unrestricted or field of interest money. We can get $1 from Kellogg with a max of cap of $1 million. Wow. And we can offer donors the tax credit. Well, the caveat was along the way was that, well, you can do that. But in order to do that, you need to be certified by the Department of Treasury at the state of Michigan as a community foundation. And the stipulation is that there were a variety of stipulations as to what did that mean. And the best choice for communities, smaller communities, was to align with and become a part of a larger community foundation. The behavior of the larger community foundation is really going to be the predictor as to the robustness and the goodness of that relationship. We brought in our first geographic component fund. The voice of Dottie Reynolds is shaking in my head right now because she hated the word affiliates. Was Wyoming, which is a suburb of Grand Rapids. And Wyoming is a very independent area. And they saw the wisdom of coming along with us. Plus, it took many cups of coffee at the Holiday Inn on a particular busy road in Grand Rapids at 7 o'clock in the morning to realize that I was not about all-consuming. I was about offering assistance. When the opportunity came up with Ionia County, which is a county that is east of our county, it took 18 months of really sitting down and getting to know people. It's all about relationships. That this wasn't an asset development strategy of our foundation. This was, what can we do to really grow philanthropy in Ionia County? And let me tell you, Ionia County is a gem. It is, while it's between Lansing and Grand Rapids, there is significant agricultural business in that county. It is a county that, while it could be considered a bedroom community, the leadership in that county is unrivaled in terms of, we're going to do this. To this very day, when I travel over for many a celebration in Ionia County, they talk about being the fastest growing community foundation in the state. Not so sure that's true anymore. I'm not so sure it's all that important to really, that it's true or not. It really is a rallying cry for them. The support that we provided was that we were there as good partners in attending board meetings, certainly creating their youth advisory committee, and that community foundation is in excess of $6 million today, and they've done really wonderful work. So, and there are other geographic component funds who are a part of us. We felt it was a good way of really helping communities grow the youth involvement in philanthropy. I still firmly believe that. I still abide by our, if you will, contract with Kellogg that we involve young people in philanthropy, that it's a good way of growing a community's pride and ability to plan for its future. We've got great relationships with our component funds, so they're all great. Well, it really helps to have Rob Collier at the helm. That's his passion, and he is a tremendous builder of strong relationships with all people. And who you see as Rob Collier is who you get all the time. The largest and best compliment he ever got was on one of our visits for the annual Foundations on the Hill visit in Washington was Senator Carl Levin, the most senior of all, a man of great wisdom, look to Rob and in front of 45 foundation leaders in the state of Michigan, proclaim him to be a phenomenal leader and appreciating his work. So there's that. So the real ability is kind of being able to read the tea leaves. And I think our work as a group in the whole area of the development of the tax credit, the concerns that came up with regard to other issues that we thought were going to erode or impede our ability to really move forth. And not just for community foundations, for all foundations. Rob has been that leader. And when it became a concern, for instance, that other types of organizations were going to be lobbying to also be able to offer a tax credit, instead of saying, oh, no, you can't, it was, well, how can we make this work so that we don't really erode the community foundation's effects? So solutions and really, and then involving all the leaders in every community, regardless of type of foundation, and getting to know their local legislators, significant legislators around the state, being able to testify at legislative hearings, also encouraging being proactive about the development of public policy, that it is not scary business, and that it is indeed now with the partnerships of Kyle Caldwell at the Michigan Nonprofit Association and Rob through Council of Michigan Foundations and others. I think that philanthropy, as represented through those two individuals, really has become a respected opinion leader, so that that legislators listen, not necessarily because we're asking for money. We're asking for how can philanthropy help, and which has become a real critical thing, particularly from 2008 on, because the state has been in a recession for more than 10 years, and led to the ability, beginning in Governor Granholm's administration, of the creation of the Office of Foundation Liaison. And I give hats off to Dave Egner and to Dave Campbell for the creation of that, which exists now in Governor Snyder's administration, because it should transcend any governor as an effective voice inside of state government of, now how can we effectively match philanthropy to leveraging state resources or whatever. And a good example of that is the Double Up Food Bucks program that many foundations around the state really added to and benefit access. I mean, so it's been, I think the state has realized that our role in public policy has brought resources to them, as well as an intelligent voice on issues. So it's hard work. You know, I went with Rob Collier one time for he does an orientation, which he has to do quite a bit given the fact that term limits are being what they are. So as always, a new, excited, eager group of legislators and for the state legislators so he does an orientation. And I'm not so sure that, I think it's a good way to introduce people. I'm not so sure that everybody understands foundations. And Dottie Johnson has, and all of us have given humorous speeches on this, have given serious speeches on this, and it's very serious from the standpoint of, you know, really what I would say at the national level, some of the concerns that I have coming up with regard to, you know, what I would say Congress's view of foundations. And so anyway, what I wish that legislators would do for at least 10 to 15 minutes is just listen. That's all I ask. And because we're not selling them on anything. We're providing good information and good education. That we are partners in the growth of the state of Michigan. I work hand in hand with our county and city commissioners each and every day. And am a familiar face around at our county commission. So it's not just at the state level, it's also at the local level. And I've had many a session, and I can do this walking very briskly to lunch with a county commissioner or a person working in the bureaucracy. But any opportunity I have of just take a breath and just listen for a minute, and then you can ask all the questions you wish. So that's what I wish. I am a big believer in data, not that and also having good data when we make decisions. But that's not the only factor that goes into decisions. So 30 years ago, I was working at another organization, and I was asked to compile what's called an environmental scan. And at that time, there was really no resource, what I would say, on the economic and social conditions that was compiled in one place. So, and this predates personal computers, I went to Calvin College, a local private college here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. They have an exceptional, at that time, and I'm sure now, an exceptional library of resources that frankly is at a graduate level, not just undergraduate. And I poured through every reference book I could get my hands on for 2 weeks, from the Michigan Statistical Abstract to census data, whatever, and came back to the office and drew up a report that I still have and am amused by now, something called the What Lies Ahead, an environmental scan of Kent County. And drew graphs and a pie graph with the bottom of a glass, and all that. Well, I thought to myself, this is crazy. There needs to be, we have business data, we can have housing starts, the da-da-da-da-da. Why can't we have data in one place and social conditions, and so that we can grab hold of that? Well, fast forward to the Center for Philanthropy was here at Grand Valley, and in its early days, started to talk to a number of people who served as directors. And it wasn't until Donna Van Iwerden, who was the executive director of the Johnson Center for Philanthropy at the time, in the late 1990s, along with Margaret Sellers Walker, who was a leader in the center at that time, of talking and talking and talking. My vision was, I want to be able to sit in front of a corporate CEO and to make the case for the impact that a grant could make. Not necessarily for fundraising, but to get their involvement. And then to be able to move that community needle on a particular issue. And thus was created ultimately the Community Research Institute. Today, it is really emerging as not only a local data provider, a statewide provider, and I think it's got the attention of folks at the national level as well. It is a factor in many discussions around this community in terms of partnering perhaps with other research entities and really providing, I think, greater strength in particular issue areas and topical areas. It is now a resource that not only are we using in terms of information and data, we are also starting a collective impact effort here in Kent County, and the Community Research Institute is an integral part of that so that we know how are we doing. I also was a big believer, and still am, that the work of research, data analyzing, and all of that did not belong at the Grand Rapids Community Foundation. It is the work of a university. The Grand Valley State University stature has grown tremendously, and it will continue to grow. Research people are snobs, and they like the names of Stanford, Harvard. Well, I add to that Grand Valley State University. So I am a big believer in the effectiveness of the center, the center is work with the Community Research Institute, and I will tell you, there are really people not only in our community, but throughout the state that really appreciate this work as well.
So this was a quick snap project you put together, right?
Oh, gosh, yes. It was amazing, in 5 minutes we put together. Tell
me a little bit about the trials.
I would say the biggest trial was explaining what was coming out of my head. Yeah. There wasn't really a mental model of it. Certainly universities have social research centers and things like that. But I was talking about more in depth than that. And when some of the staff at the Community Research Institute showed us the ability to do mapping and bringing data alive at a block level, a household level, it was not from the standpoint of invading privacy, but wow, if this neighborhood is having these kinds of issues in relation to affordable housing, persons who are really needing public assistance, unemployment rate, maybe we ought to be providing services in that area. Maybe we ought to be offering youth employment services. Maybe we can really figure out all this stuff. So, well, because I didn't have perhaps the lingo, the correct language, it really took the faith and trust of the leaders here at Grand Valley to finally say, okay, does this look like what you want? And the fact that Donna Van Iwerden was the person who basically looked at me and said, you do realize that if we build the research capability, this is an institution that really believes in the education of students. And I don't want to run counter to that, but we're really going to need dedicated staff. Can you help with that? And we have been happily providing in a partnership arrangement financial support to the Center for Philanthropy for many years now, as well as for the Community Research Institute. So, and now the whole center has become, not only it has become so connected with the Community Research Institute that the work that's going out and other areas of the center, it really has fed into that. So it was really trying to put the right words to what is the vision and trying to help people understand we really need to have good information to make good decisions. And what does that look like? And so it took some convincing, and now I think every Grand Valley State University president, from Don Lubbers to Mark Murray to now Tom Haas, realize that it is an essential resource, and they're proud of it, and they should be. Kellogg has the ability to really make things happen. I'll put it out there. And certainly the vision of Russ Mawby will continue to live on forever. And his vision has come from, I would say, kindness in his heart, that giving people the ability to do things, not necessarily to lean on, but okay, make it happen, and high expectations. And so I kind of think about that from time to time, that, his love came from his heart. And when Joel and many others came out of that environment, even though Joel would write 17 pages of questions on a proposal, it came, we always would say, out of the love. And so I say that humorously, but I would say that Kellogg has a history of working in partnership with its other foundation partners in the state. And could this happen anywhere else without Kellogg? I have to say, not to the degree that, to be quite frank, not to the degree that it has. Could it happen? Yeah. And could it happen if foundations in a particular area that didn't have a Kellogg or C.S. Mott Foundation, because really Mott has been and will continue to be a key leader as well, in particular, that it would take a real strength of foundation leaders in a given area to say, we really need to convince a larger independent foundation to assist us. And that might take some convincing. It took some convincing, frankly, back and forth with the Kellogg Foundation when it related to the growth, when we had the vision of growing community philanthropy through community foundations, covering the state of Michigan was our vision. And the Kellogg Foundation said, you know, that's a great idea. We also want you to involve young people in philanthropy. That will really root it well. And so I would also say, because of that condition, if you will, that's why it's continued to work well in this state. Because the condition was growing the pipeline for the next generation of philanthropic leaders. And it was like, that's a great idea. There are examples of other states in the United States that have had a large foundation helping to develop them. And I would say it's been successful. I would say it's a completely different train of thought, however. And so it's all good, not bad. But I would just basically say, with the strength of and the wisdom of the Council of Michigan Foundations, which really was the convening place for community foundations and all other types of foundations, but community foundations in particular, and hand in hand with the Kellogg Foundation, I just look at now we have covered the state of Michigan with community foundations. We have, in many places, still very active councils or committees of young people making grant decisions and developing what I would say leaders. And we have examples of young leaders now in the state of Michigan who are former members of these youth advisory committees. So what a gift Kellogg gave us, and hopefully can continue to have what I would say that love coming out of the heart like Russ Mulvey has had. The Council of Michigan Foundations in particular, as a regional association of grant makers, has what I would say gained a lot of strength in terms of the services it provides its members. It has not been without some pain. And so I would say that the listening to members is really critical, and to understand what they need and what they want, and really what those members can bring to the table as well. It's a two-way street. I would say that the Grand Rapids Community Foundation could not have had the success that it has enjoyed and is continuing to enjoy had it not been for the strong moral support, intellectual support of the Council of Michigan Foundations. I will just say that. And added to that, I continue to be indebted to both Mott and to Kellogg Foundation as well. And under Kyle Caldwell's leadership, the Michigan Nonprofit Association is really gaining strength. It is a leader in this country. And we do lean on them as a member with regard to policy information, understanding issues better as they affect not only ourselves, but also, I'm a big believer in the growth of not necessarily the numbers, but the strength and the leadership of the nonprofit sector. I'm going to pause here a moment because what I'd also like to say, having been a person whose entire career has been in the philanthropic nonprofit sector, the growth of the social sector, as Jim Collins penned it, my personal belief is that we are an extremely strong sector and to not be discounted. When I sit in meetings with many persons from the for-profit business sector, their comments are often patronizing, and oh, those poor little things. So I'm a big believer in speaking up by saying there is tremendous strength in this sector. Did you know that hospitals in the state of Michigan are not-for-profits? Did you know that universities and some private colleges are not-for-profits? So when we talk about the nonprofit sector, understand that it is as diverse as somebody saying a blanket statement as the business sector. Because then you all go into the whole thing of, well, you've got the financial sector, the manufacturing sector, med sector, you've got this. And I just have to say that it is important as a foundation leader to really continue to advocate for the strength of leadership in the nonprofit sector and to grow the capacity of the sector to meet what I would say some of the largest problems facing our state, our country, the world. I had the good fortune back in the year 2000 of being selected to be a part of an exchange program, the Transatlantic Community Foundation Exchange Program that was in its pioneer year. And regrettably, it's no longer in existence, but it was a partnership of the King Baudouin Foundation in Belgium, which is a large community foundation, the C.S. Mott Foundation, and a really great organization, the German Marshall Fund. And there was a selection of 5 people from the United States and 5 people from Europe. And it wasn't a direct exchange, but it was that our role was to go over to a particular area in Europe and vice versa here. And it was focusing on just community foundations. And I had the good fortune of being asked to go to a little town in northern Italy called Lecco. And at the time, and still, this person is still there, a gentleman by the name of Bernardino Quesade, who had traveled to the United States and connected up with the Council of Michigan Foundations. He wanted to learn everything he could learn about community foundations because he wanted to do this in Italy. And their system of bank conversions, whatever, led to an amazing amount of money to be able to do this. So I'm in northern Italy, the year 2000. The context of the time was the fact that that the stock market was still soaring, the tech bust had yet to occur, and Bernardino had some real plans for me. And he was also my translator, which was quite interesting. And Bernardino was quite taken at the time by a gentleman who was a leader a community foundation leader in California by the name of Peter Hero. Peter Hero ran a foundation in Silicon Valley, and Peter Hero was featured in Forbes magazine for having his foundation raising $500,000 a day. And really, what I would say, investing in the stock market as the venture capitalists in Silicon Valley would do. So here I am from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and we're doing great. We're doing great, but we're not investing like venture capitalists in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So we're sitting in an organizing meeting in Monza, Italy, and Bernardino says, "Tell your story." So I told the story of community foundations and our investments and our philosophy and really what community foundations can do to communities. And this was about my second week into this fellowship. Bernardino looked at me and smiled and translated for the group. Beautiful Italian poured out of his mouth. And then the words, "Peter Hero," came out. And I looked at him and said, "What did you just say?" Well, I told them not to listen to you as far as investments are concerned, that we really needed to be aggressive like Peter Hero. And so the story is that he has and continues to be a leader in the Lombardy region in Italy, but he was certainly not translating my words. Bernardino was using me to translate his thoughts. out to the groups around Italy. He was nice enough, however, to bring me back about 5-6 years later to speak at a conference in Milan. And he, by that time, he had been a little bit more toned down, but the experience was great, and Bernardino still thrives to this day.
It's good. It's a great story. Thank you.
Peter Hero.
Yeah, Peter Hero. He's been a great character around West Michigan,
Well,
too.
the fact of the matter is, I also had bought all these books about how to do business in Italy, and there was this book about, Italians are explosive, Italians do this, and so I'm reading this out loud to him in the car on one of the roads. He took the book out of my hand, threw it out the window. He says, those are people in southern Italy. Whatever. My formative years were the 1960s. And the 1960s were the emergence of the Vietnam War, civil rights, and women's rights. And I was deeply influenced by that. I will say that my parents were definitely role models. They were persons who did allow for what I would say the open discussion. They were very conservative. And I think that by the time that I hit junior high school, now known as middle school, that I was beginning, because my parents didn't influence me to the point of you must share our opinions, that I think with the war raging, which I didn't really understand all that well, but more importantly, the civil rights movement. I don't know how any person in the 1960s couldn't have been influenced by the Freedom Riders and by the struggle and Martin Luther King and the passage of the Civil Rights Act and all that stuff that was going on. And I started doing a lot of reading. And so from junior high through high school, while I was a good student in all the appropriate things, I was also a good student of really trying to feel, what does it feel like? I grew up in an affluent suburban area in Detroit. And I really wanted to understand other experiences. So I volunteered one summer, and this again wasn't because I was this naive little white girl from this suburban area. I really wanted to learn. And I volunteered for an entire summer at an elementary school in the core city of Detroit, on the east side of Detroit, when Head Start was just starting. So it tells you how long ago this was. And worked with primarily children who were from kindergarten to third grade, whose motor skills were so not developed that they needed to learn how to walk and all that. Well, I got to tell you, the teachers, the students, the parents, it was a great time to be exposed to all of that and to become friends. Not just, I'm here to help, more, I'm here to learn. That was a big moment in my life, and I knew at that time that I wanted to get involved with something that meant that I could really dig in and social change. Now, I will tell you that every student across this nation who has ever applied to college or university has to always write an essay. And how many essays start with, I want to change the world? Well, I did. And so I pursued a course of sociology, and at that time becoming a teacher, because that's what women did back in that era, something to fall back on. And I took sociology. I was fascinated by sociology. It talked about all the things that were happening. The emergence of Martin Luther King, and how did that movement, it was just a fabulous time. And I knew I wanted to get involved in somehow, some way. So again, I went. And I will say I was somewhat influenced in the 7th grade. I did write a paper about the fact that I wanted to be a social worker. Where that came from, I don't know. So then I, through a variety of circumstances and all that, I got a job. When I moved here to Grand Rapids, I moved here to Grand Rapids to be married, and then ultimately that didn't work out. But the career did, and I was a caseworker at the American Red Cross during the what I would say the last few years of the Vietnam War. And my job was that of service to military families and veterans and disaster services. A great first job, tremendous first job. Got to know systems and problem solving and working with people. I then wanted to go on to grad school, and I did. And for a couple years, I took courses that as an extended degree student, and then finally had to dive in and do this full time. Well, I got this wonderful opportunity to work with Pat Babcock, who at that time was a legislative aide to Governor Milliken, and as well as a woman by the name of Pat Curran, both social workers, but in a different way, a policy way. And my degree is a master's of social work, but with a concentration in policy planning and administration, or as I say back in the day, it's the MBA of whatever. After grad school and after that wonderful internship, I became, immediately upon graduation, became an associate executive of the United Way of Kent County here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And it was a wonderful opportunity for me to really learn and to execute social planning, allocations to agencies, diving into issues, understanding leadership. It was a good training ground. And I loved it. And I became the head of the planning division and I learned what it was to be the head of something, and working with other community leaders and learning about that interesting world of foundations. And I had heard and worked with people, they had applied to the Kellogg Foundation. I thought, how do you do that? How do you get to know people there? And I had heard on the horizon a little bit about the Council of Michigan Foundations. But at that time, this is in the 80s, still foundations were a concept to me, not a reality. I did get to know the woman who at that time was the executive director, then known, of the Grand Rapids Foundation. Got to know also the people who were leading the Steelcase Foundation. And those were the two primary foundations in the Grand Rapids area, and getting to know them and understand them. So when Pat Edison decided to retire, and she still is a significant part of the Grand Rapids Community Foundation and truly a mentor and really a great person, I thought, well, what do I have to lose? So I applied for the job, and I got it. Well, I had a part-time secretary at the time who realized that I was going to be serious about working, and she decided that maybe she needed to do other things. And so for 6 weeks of my life, one of the most social people I know sat at the Grand Rapids Foundation and said, what am I going to do? So I will say that I poured myself into understanding the history of the foundation, wrote the history so I could have an understanding, along with two people I hired within 4 months of my coming on board, so that we could understand the culture of the foundation. And they are still with me today. Lynn Black's our CFO, and Marcia Rapp's our Vice President for Programs. I will tell you that the three of us really made that place sing within a year. And it was already singing, but and became connected to the Council of Michigan Foundations and other entities that were just like us around the state. And realized that the heart of who we are, just like Russ Mawby's heart and love, was the fact that we could do things in the community and not to denigrate grant making, because it is at the core of who we are and what we do. But we could also do other things. We could influence policy. We could get involved in issues and be a voice at the table. Heck, we could create that community table and go out into communities, visit with neighborhood associations, understand how grant dollars are used. well, gosh, and then along the way, how we can leverage those grant dollars with governmental dollars and how we can build those partnerships. So over the course of the last 25 years, we have grown tremendously, not out of ego, but out of, darn it all, we're going to make this work. And so I'm feeling that there's certainly a large part of me is at the core of the foundation, along with a large part of our trustees and our staff. And we have really committed and dedicated staff. So, you know, I would say that I'm really love to speak out on a variety of issues, not in a hurtful way, but in a clarifying and educational way. But my roots of philanthropy, my roots of understanding social change, go back to the little girl in the 1960s, watching television, hearing on the radio, living through the riots in the city of Detroit, and hearing the gunshots in the middle of the night because we lived that close to the border between the suburb I lived in and the city of Detroit. And then really wanting to understand more what's going on here. And let me put myself in the place of others so I can really understand. So that was my big influence. Well, I do believe that you do need a good knowledge background. And I do believe that you need a good education. And I still draw back on some of the things in particular that I learned in grad school. And I still have some of those books sitting on my shelf. Now more for, oh yeah, it's in there. So I will say that. But boy, I'll tell you, the biggest thing is still that empathetic thread and understanding critical problem-solving skills. Not because you have to be the person that saves the world, but that you really can take apart a particular issue or problem. And that really is more born by experience than anything. So I would say to your daughter, you know, read everything that you can. I mean, like I did back in the 60s, and still do. But now, you know, we have so much information. And as a person who's addicted to Facebook, Twitter, on all things social media, my primary news source is links and reading the New York Times online and now every daily newspaper online. So, you know, and to surround yourself with good information and be a curious person. And that's something you're not going to learn, but that's something of, oh, no, wait a minute. Now, what's the basis of that? Let's learn more about that. So it's the whole thing of continual learning, and I know that I will be a continual learner until the day the lights go out. It has taken me a number of years to be able to say that I really work arm in arm with a board of trustees. Our current board of trustees are the most tremendous leaders around, and that is not, it's not hyperbole. It really is true. And I would say in my beginning years, it was a board that didn't know how to work with the then executive director, and an executive director who had never worked with a board either. So one of the things that I learned how to do out of the chute was going to meet with individual board members. I would say that I had struggles the first 5 years of me being president of the Community Foundation, not from people not wanting to do things, but there was a power dynamic. And I would often talk to them about what is the role of the board, is policy and high-level activity. Your primary role is hiring and firing of the leader and good fiduciary responsibility and governance. But we're going to do the staff work. And this is what staff work is, and this is what board work is. And I think a breakthrough for me, frankly, was back in the late 80s and early 90s, I asked Kathy Agar to come and assist with a strategic planning process, which had never been done before, and insisted that our board members become a part of that. And I think that the board then realized that this was an entity that wasn't just about meeting every other month and making grant decisions, that there was more to this than that, and sat up and they paid attention. So my thing is that I've never taken my role for granted, and say that to my leadership all the time, that I am there as their leader, but also as the person who is their support, who listens and wants to listen. We're the executors, we're the implementers, and we certainly want to have their good insight on policy matters and major decisions, and certainly be involved with strategy development to a degree. And now the leaders on our board are people who have had the experience of being on boards, on for-profit boards and larger nonprofit boards. So it isn't a matter of telling them this is board work and this is staff work. And it's what I would say a real strong partnership. It took years to develop that partnership. And it took me of being able to have the confidence as a leader to be able to do that in a respectful manner. My favorite type of board member is what I would say the synthesizer, the person that gathers it all in and then is the person who, after a lot of discussion, will provide the insight by saying, in the summarizer, well, from what I've heard today, that this is the insight that I will give the board. And I think we've agreed on this, correct? And there are two people in particular, a current board member and a former board member, who serve in that capacity, who, by virtue of their and let me tell you that these two people are significant leaders, and they provide the vision and the aspiration, and they provide the, what I say, positive momentum. Even when I've made a mistake, it's put in a way that said, well, you know, there's opportunity in this, and let's move forward. Because there have been a lot of decisions that have been made by me and the foundation that haven't turned out the way that they're supposed to. But these two individuals are people who understand that in order for us to really make change and to be about change, that you have to take risks and you have to make mistakes. But so it's that kind of a type who the strength of their leadership isn't how much they talk or the volume of their voice. Well, I'll end with where I began. I am probably one of the most fortunate people around. And I don't view my job as a job. I view it as my life's work. I do know how to go on vacation, however, and I do know how to have fun. But there isn't a day that goes by that I don't understand my good fortune. And I constantly remind our superior staff that we don't have much time on this earth. So use the opportunity of being in an organization that's open enough to really want to listen and to make some significant change, to not just sit back and fill out a form and say, okay, I've done a lot of work today, but understand what it means to make a difference. It means going out there and getting involved, talking to people, arguing, coming to peace with people, and really being a model of what does it mean to be a strong community leader that isn't about our ego, but is about really putting out there what is best for what I would say the best part of our state and the strength of our state. So, the other piece in this probably not about philanthropy, but is about building a real strong staff. And we've had the good fortune this last year of being honored in a variety of ways of of really developing good staff and good morale. What I've learned in the past 7 years is the fact that there isn't a day that goes by that I need to pay attention to that, and that we need to measure that, and we need to understand that, as well as making sure that all of us at the Grand Rapids Community Foundation embrace diversity, inclusion, and change, and not just use words, but that we demonstrate it, we live it, and we are it. So.